I thought today would be the proudest day of my life. My MBA graduation gown shimmered under the spring sun, cameras flashed, and the air buzzed with celebration. Then my phone buzzed, a message from my husband. Don't expect support. My hands froze around the diploma. For a moment, the cheers faded, replaced by a sharp ringing in my ears. That's when another vibration hit, a call from a number I didn't recognize. A calm, confident voice said, "I've been watching your project, and I think you're sitting on something worth $500,000. The auditorium smelled faintly of fresh flowers and polished wood. My name echoed through the speakers, followed by a wave of polite applause. As I walked across the stage, the silky folds of my MBA graduation gown brushed against my legs, catching the light from 1,000 camera flashes. I looked toward the front row, searching for a proud smile, some small acknowledgement. The entire row was occupied by my husband's family, my mother-in-law sitting stiff as marble, my sister-in-law tapping her phone, and Richard staring down at his screen, his thumb scrolling lazily. No eye contact, no smile, just the glow of his phone on his face. When I reached for the diploma, my phone buzzed in my palm. I stole a quick glance. One new message from Richard. Don't expect support. For a heartbeat, my feet rooted to the stage. The sound of clapping became muffled, as if I were underwater. My cheeks burned, but not from pride. I managed a mechanical smile for the photographer before stepping down, each movement heavier than the last. I had endured years of comments like, "It's just a hobby degree," and "Don't forget who pays the bills." At dinner, Richard would smirk when his mother asked how my little classes were going. They all believed that no matter how much I studied, my place was in the shadow of his career. That belief sat on me like a weight, one I'd silently been training to throw off. I reached my seat and forced my breathing to slow. That's when the phone buzzed again, this time an unfamiliar number. My thumb hesitated, but I answered. "Emma Carter?" The voice was male, calm, deliberate. "Yes, speaking." "I've been following your project. I think you're sitting on something worth $500,000. The hum of the ceremony faded behind me. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" I asked. "My name is Daniel Lee. You might have heard of me." I had. Everyone in the startup world had. Daniel Lee was infamous for turning struggling companies into overnight sensations with nothing but a single viral tweet. Last month, he'd saved a food delivery app from collapse, and the stock had tripled in 2 weeks. "I saw a concept for your product on TikTok," he continued. "It had your initials on the design file. I want to meet." My mind spun. I had never posted my prototype online. "I never put it out there," I said slowly. "You didn't," he replied. "But someone did. Your sister-in-law, maybe. The account name matches hers. She mocked it, but the comments are full of people saying they'd buy it." Heat flooded my chest. Not embarrassment this time, but something sharper. So they'd tried to humiliate me, and instead, they'd caught the attention of the one man whose endorsement could change everything. "I'll send you a car," Daniel said. "Today, we talk in person, and Emma, don't tell anyone, especially not your husband." I ended the call staring at the stage where another graduate shook hands with the dean. My hands trembled, not from the sting of Richard's message anymore, but from the raw, unexpected power of a door swinging open. When I checked my messages again, a new one sat beneath Richard's cutting line. This one wasn't from Daniel. It was an email with no subject line, from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it. Inside was a single folder, titled Receipts. Dozens of screenshots spilled out, emails between Richard and his mother discussing ways to convince me to sign over rights to my business plan, mocking my lack of real connections. One thread included my sister-in-law bragging about posting that stupid design online to get her to quit. The breath caught in my throat. They hadn't just doubted me, they'd actively worked against me, and now, unknowingly, they'd given me the very exposure that could turn my idea into a funded reality. The applause for the next graduate jolted me back. My diploma felt different in my hands now, not as a symbol of completion, but as a weapon. Richard glanced at me across the rows, a flicker of smugness in his eyes, as if he'd already decided how my future would end. I met his gaze for a moment, long enough for him to look away. Then I slipped my phone into my bag, fingers tightening around the strap. They thought they'd buried me under their condescension. What they didn't know was that the burial had planted a seed, and with Daniel Lee waiting, I was ready to make it grow. The following morning, I walked into the family's breakfast room with my shoulders slumped and my hair tied in a loose, tired knot. My mother-in-law glanced up from her coffee, her eyes flicking over me with the satisfaction of someone confirming a prediction. Richard didn't even look up from his tablet. "I don't know what I'm going to do," I sighed, setting a mug down and letting my voice quiver. The graduation's over, and maybe they were right. Maybe this business thing isn't realistic. No one rushed to reassure me. Instead, my sister-in-law smirked over her phone, and my mother-in-law leaned forward, her tone syrupy. "Emma, dear, at least you have Richard. You can let go of this hobby. There are better ways to spend your time than chasing something that won't work." Richard finally spoke, his voice calm, almost pitying. "If you really want to walk away, I can help you find a buyer for your idea. You won't get much, but at least you'll recover a little." I forced a small nod, eyes cast down. They thought they'd won. Later, as I passed the study, I heard muffled voices through the slightly open door. My mother-in-law's sharp tone cut through. "If we can get her to sign, we'll just sell the concept to that contact in Chicago. He owes us a favor." Richard's voice followed, low and certain. "She'll fold. She always does. She's desperate for approval." A hot coil of rage twisted in my chest, but I didn't make a sound. I walked away silently, slipping my phone from my pocket and opening a secure app. A few taps later, I triggered what I called Plan Ghost. Every genuine file, contract, and prototype design was instantly encrypted and wiped from the shared company server. All that remained were decoy versions, flawed, incomplete, and useless without the missing pieces I kept offline. That afternoon, Daniel Lee's driver picked me up in a black sedan. I arrived at a glass-walled office high above the city, where Daniel stood by a massive whiteboard filled with market projections. He turned, his smile brief but approving. "Let's see what you've really got," he said. I laid out my portfolio, the real one, the brand identity, the supplier contracts already in principle, the list of 30 mid-tier influencers ready to collaborate, the manufacturing estimates. Daniel scanned each page, his expression sharpening. "This isn't a pitch," he said finally. "It's a launch plan." I hesitated before adding, "One of those influencers, Ava Morgan, she's a former classmate of Richard's. He humiliated her in front of an entire lecture hall once. She told me she'd do this for free just to watch him squirm." Daniel's lips curved into a slow smile. "Personal vendettas make for excellent publicity." I showed him Ava's proposal, a coordinated reveal campaign culminating in a live stream event. The plan was daring. Announce the product live, invite pre-orders, and cut in a segment where Ava would accidentally drop a story about Richard's past arrogance, linking it to why he'd dismissed the product's potential. "You realize," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair, "if this works, you'll not only win the market, you'll humiliate your biggest saboteur in front of thousands." "I realize," I said, my voice steady. "That's why I'm not saying a word until launch day." He tapped his fingers on the desk. "Then we make it bigger. We aim for millions watching, not thousands." Ava confirmed her involvement that evening over a video call, her grin sharp. "I've been waiting for this moment since college," she said. "If we're doing this, I'm going all in. Full live stream, no filters. I'll make sure he's watching when I tell the story." The image of Richard's face, frozen as the world heard exactly what kind of man he really was, sent a flicker of satisfaction through me. We finalized the date, locking in suppliers and coordinating social media teasers that hinted at something revolutionary without giving away the product. Every detail was set in motion with military precision. As I left Daniel's office that night, the city lights stretched out below me, a glittering web of opportunity. The fear that had clenched my gut the day before was gone, replaced by a rising surge of control. In my bag, my phone buzzed with a notification from Ava. Let's burn him. Live. I allowed myself a thin smile. They thought I'd given up. They had no idea the real game had just begun. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part with the precision of a stage actress. In public, I was still the graduate finding her footing. Behind the scenes, I was setting a trap. Every night, I worked late on a separate prototype, one riddled with subtle but catastrophic flaws. Incorrect dimensions, unstable materials, manufacturing specs that would collapse under real-world use. On paper, it looked plausible. In reality, it was a ticking bomb. I stored this poison chalice on a cloud drive linked to the company server, with file names that matched the ones Richard had always tried to access. The genuine files were safe on an encrypted offline drive only I could open. All I had to do was wait for his greed to do the rest. It didn't take long. 3 days later, I received a push notification from the server. An unusual login from Richard's laptop at 2:14 a.m. He thought he was being clever, waiting until I was asleep. By morning, those flawed designs were gone from the shared folder. I deleted the alert from my phone and went about my day as if nothing had happened. By the end of the week, whispers began circulating in the industry. A competing brand, Orion Tech, was teasing a product uncannily similar to mine. Their marketing materials were bold, claiming they'd revolutionize the market and would be first to launch. I could almost hear Richard's smugness from across the house. On launch day, Orion Tech's livestream began. Thousands tuned in to watch as their CEO unveiled the product with grand gestures. The applause from the live audience barely covered the first murmurs of doubt. Within minutes of the first demo, the problem surfaced. The device failed to function as promised, overheating, freezing, and in some cases, breaking apart. The live stream chat turned savage. Screenshots of failed units flooded Twitter. Within hours, the hashtag #NeedFailRichard trended, fueled by industry insiders who'd caught wind of his involvement in consulting for Orion Tech. His name was suddenly attached to the worst tech launch of the year. I sat in my office, the glow of the screen painting my face as I watched the chaos unfold. The satisfaction wasn't just in watching the disaster, it was knowing the exact moment Richard would realize I'd been 3 steps ahead all along. That moment came later that night, when he burst into my office without knocking. His face was flushed, his voice sharp. "You did this," he hissed. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "Do what?" "Don't play dumb. Those were your files. You set me up." I tilted my head. "You mean the files you weren't supposed to have?" His jaw clenched, but there was nothing he could say without admitting to theft. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. The next morning, I rolled out my own campaign. My team and I released the real product in a crisp, no-nonsense video showcasing flawless performance, clean design, and undeniable functionality. We invited independent reviewers to test it live on camera. Their astonished reactions spoke louder than any ad money could buy. Within 48 hours, orders surged past projections. Headlines read, "Emma Carter saves industry after Orion Tech disaster," and "The Real Deal. Why this CEO's vision works." Daniel called, his tone equal parts pride and amusement. "You've done what few can. You turned their failure into your launch pad." The public narrative shifted rapidly. Where Richard's name had been associated with failure, mine was now synonymous with reliability and innovation. Articles dissected the contrast between my meticulous rollout and Orion's reckless haste. Industry forums joked that I'd cleaned up the mess he left behind. Then came the inevitable. Richard's access to the investor network was revoked. Daniel personally made the call, citing breach of trust and reputational risk. The doors Richard had once walked through without question now slammed shut. I should have felt victorious, and part of me did. But another part, colder, quieter, knew this wasn't the end. Richard had too much pride to fade into the background. That certainty arrived in my inbox 3 days later. The email had no sender name, just an encrypted address, no subject line. I clicked it open, half expecting spam. One sentence appeared on the screen. The game isn't over. He still has one card left. No signature, no explanation. Just that. I stared at the words, the glow of the monitor reflecting in the dark window behind me. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the anticipation of whatever came next. Because if Richard thought he still had a move to make, I was ready to meet him on the board. The warning email lingered in my mind for days, its shadow stretching over every meeting, every handshake. Then, the rumors started. A European conglomerate, Solvex International, had begun making inquiries about my company. Too many inquiries. They weren't subtle either. My suppliers reported being approached with offers to change partners, and one of my junior executives received a lunch invitation from a Solvex recruiter who hinted at a big shift coming soon. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots. Richard had found his last card, Solvex. They had the money, the influence, and the willingness to get their hands dirty. I didn't panic. Instead, I went quiet. Publicly, at least. Privately, I began collecting everything. Every email I could find, every message passed in carelessness. I bought 2 discreet cameras, hiding one inside the ceramic sugar jar in my mother-in-law's kitchen. I knew that was where the most unfiltered conversations happened, between the clink of spoons and the hiss of the coffee machine. It didn't take long. On the second day, I captured a clear recording of Richard and my mother-in-law discussing how Solvex planned to persuade my board into a buyout. "She's too stubborn," my mother-in-law said, "but if the board votes, she can't stop it." 2 days later, another recording. Richard meeting with a Solvex liaison at a downtown cafe, passing them a flash drive. He smiled like a man sealing a victory. But the most damning evidence came from a series of encrypted emails I pulled from a shared server. They revealed that Solvex had already secured the loyalty of one of my board members, Daniel's longtime associate, James Foster. I read the thread twice, each word solidifying the truth. They weren't just trying to push me out. They wanted the patents, the brand, and the network I'd built. I forwarded everything to a secure drive, labeling the folder Receipts. When the day came, I announced a major corporate update and invited press, stakeholders, and key industry voices. The livestream countdown clock ticked down in front of thousands of viewers. I stepped onto the stage in a tailored navy suit, the bright lights making the glass podium gleam. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady. "I'm here today to address recent rumors regarding this company's future, and I intend to do it with complete transparency." I clicked the remote. On the massive screen behind me, an email thread appeared. Richard's words in black and white discussing how to dismantle my position. Then came the video from my mother-in-law's kitchen, her voice clear as crystal admitting to conspiring with Solvex. The final blow, footage of Richard sliding that flash drive across the cafe table. The chat on the live stream exploded. Reporters' hands shot up, cameras flashed like lightning. I didn't stop. I showed the Solvex payment records to James Foster's private account, each transaction neatly documented. By the time I was done, the air in the room had shifted. I wasn't the CEO on trial anymore. I was the whistleblower, the survivor, the one who had pulled the curtain back. Within hours, Solvex stock plummeted. Analysts speculated about criminal investigations. Richard's name flooded social media again, this time attached to phrases like corporate betrayal and international scandal. By nightfall, his phone number was deactivated. His LinkedIn profile disappeared. The empire of influence he'd cultivated collapsed in less than a day. I was in my office late that evening, the city humming faintly through the glass, when my assistant brought in an envelope. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a short letter. Emma, I was wrong about you. I see that now. I'm sorry. It was signed by my mother-in-law, but it wasn't the apology that made my pulse spike. Folded inside the letter was a small slip of paper, a bank statement showing a wire transfer from an account I recognized. The sender's name was mine. The date was 2 years ago. The amount was enough to ruin me if anyone believed I'd sent it. I stared at it, cold creeping into my chest. This wasn't over, not yet. For weeks after the Solvex takedown, the media crowned me a hero. My inbox overflowed with partnership offers, keynote invitations, and congratulations from people who had once ignored my calls. Our sales numbers shattered projections, and for the first time since I'd started this journey, I felt the weight of survival lift. But with the recognition came a glare I couldn't turn off. Paparazzi began staking out the front of my office building, snapping photos of me leaving in the evening. A grainy image of me grabbing groceries in sweatpants appeared on a tabloid site under the headline, "The CEO Who Saved an Industry. Is She Cracking Under Pressure?" Rumors swirled about my personal life. Some blogs speculated about my marriage, others about my supposed hidden investors. I learned to tune most of it out, but the constant hum of attention wore me thin. Privacy became a luxury I no longer had. Inside the company, the boardroom was changing. A new block of shareholders, brought in after the public surge in value, started pushing aggressive expansion strategies. "You have to capitalize now," one of them insisted during a meeting. "We triple production, we widen margins, we squeeze the market dry." I resisted. Our customers trust us because we deliver quality, not because we flood the market. They didn't like that answer. I could see it in their tight smiles and the way their eyes darted toward each other. The company I'd built was profitable, respected, and resilient, but it was no longer entirely mine. One evening, I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my assistant knocked and stepped inside, looking uneasy. "There's something you need to see," she said, placing an envelope on my desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a formal notice of capital withdrawal. My mentor, Alex Whitmore, the man who had backed me from the start, was pulling his entire investment. Effective immediately. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I called him that night. "Alex, what's going on?" His voice was tight-clipped. "Emma, I can't stay in. It's complicated." "Complicated how? You've believed in this from the beginning." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the faint creak of a chair on his end. "Let's just say there are things in my past that I'd prefer to keep buried, and someone's making it clear they won't stay buried unless I walk away." I didn't need to ask who. "Richard," I said flatly. Alex didn't confirm, but he didn't deny it either. "I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you more, but my hands are tied." When the call ended, I sat in the dark office, the city's neon bleeding through the blinds. Richard had vanished from the public stage, but he hadn't disappeared. He was pulling strings from the shadows, reshaping the board in his favor, and now he'd taken away my strongest ally. Over the next week, subtle changes began to ripple through the company. Projects I'd greenlit were delayed without explanation. Emails were rerouted, decisions questioned. It was as if an invisible hand was nudging me toward irrelevance. Then the message came. It arrived in a plain white envelope slid under my office door. No name, no return address. Just a single page inside. "Emma, we both know this game can't go on forever. I have no interest in dragging your name through the mud, but I do have the means to do so. You've seen how easily allies can be persuaded. I'm giving you a choice. Step down as CEO, hand over operational control, and I'll make sure the past stays buried. Refuse, and I will burn it all. Your company, your reputation, your future. You have 7 days." The signature was a single letter. R. I read it twice, my hands tightening on the paper until it crumpled. It wasn't just a threat, it was a calculated move, the kind that left no safe middle ground. If I stayed, I'd be fighting a war on every front. If I left, I'd hand him the victory he'd been chasing from the beginning. The clock had started ticking. The week that followed Richard's ultimatum felt like standing on a narrow bridge in the middle of a storm. Every meeting was another gust of wind, every whispered conversation another crack in the planks beneath my feet. The board was restless. Investors wanted answers. And Richard, wherever he was watching, waiting for me to choose between surrender and destruction. But I had no intention of playing by his rules. 3 days before the deadline, I walked into my office at dawn, opened my laptop, and began writing a press release. My legal team warned against it. My PR manager begged for a softer approach, but I kept typing. By noon, the announcement was ready. We were releasing the core design and code of our flagship technology to the public, free to use, adapt, and improve. Within hours of posting, my inbox exploded. Some called me reckless. Others called me a visionary. Tech journalists dissected every line of the open source license. But the reaction that mattered most came from the startup community. Forums lit up with excitement. Developers, engineers, and entrepreneurs began forming teams overnight to build on what we had created. By the end of the second day, dozens of prototypes and adaptations were already in progress. Our technology was no longer a bargaining chip Richard could use. It was everywhere, in everyone's hands. Daniel called me that night. "You just killed the black market for your own product," he said, "and you made sure no one, not even Richard, can control it." "That was the point," I replied. On the morning of the deadline, an article appeared in the Global Business Journal, "The Unbreakable CEO: How Emma Carter Defied Corporate Blackmail by Giving Away Her Crown Jewel." The headline stuck. People began using it as a rallying cry. My social media feeds were filled with strangers thanking me for leveling the playing field. Richard never sent another threat. With the immediate danger gone, I turned to the future. The open source move had shifted our identity as a company. We were no longer just a manufacturer. We were a platform, a catalyst for innovation. But to keep that spirit alive, I needed to change more than our product. I needed to change the way we ran the business. I called an all-hands meeting. In the glass-walled atrium, my employees gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and anticipation. "When I started this company," I began, "it was a dream I fought to protect from people who underestimated us. Today, that fight is over, but our mission isn't. From this day forward, we're restructuring. Every core team member will have ownership, real equity. This is your company as much as mine." The room was silent for a moment, and then the applause started, soft at first, then building into a roar. Some people cried, others hugged. I saw relief in their eyes, but also something stronger: pride. In the months that followed, the shift transformed everything. Decisions moved faster. People took risks, knowing they were building something for themselves, not just for me. Our profits stabilized, but more importantly, our reputation solidified as a company that valued its people as much as its products. One crisp autumn afternoon, an envelope arrived with the university's seal. Inside was an invitation to return, not as a student, but as the keynote speaker for the next MBA graduation ceremony. On the day of the event, I stood at the edge of the same stage where Richard's message had once shattered my pride. The air smelled the same: flowers, wood polish. But this time, the weight in my chest was different. Cameras flashed as I walked forward, not as the woman hoping for approval, but as someone who had built and defended something worth standing for. As I spoke to the graduates, I told them the truth, that success isn't about avoiding failure, but about refusing to let failure define you. I saw heads nodding, pens scribbling, and in the back rows, faces lighting up with possibility. When the ceremony ended, I stepped into the sunlight, the crowd around me a blur of congratulations and handshakes. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the sound of celebration that was mine to claim. That's when my phone buzzed. One new email, no subject line. The sender's name made my stomach tighten. not with fear, but with curiosity. It was from Richard. We need to talk, this time about working together. I stared at the screen, the noise of the crowd fading behind me. For the first time in years, I didn't know whether to laugh, delete it, or write back. The game, it seemed, was never truly over.